right, and we're back, and we're going to continue this conversation or review of the president's virtual town hall with Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum from Sunday. The next question came in from a lady named Leslie Caulfield from New Jersey, and her question says that she's heard that the coronavirus threat was mentioned in the president's briefings over the course of a few weeks, and yet he didn't take any action. And she's asking why he didn't take any actions. Trump's response is he first heard about it on January 23rd, and at the time he heard about it from his security advisors, the intelligence people. They said it was no big deal. They just were mentioning that it might be coming to America, but they were not concerned about it. He mentions how Pelosi and Fauci and Biden all basically said it wasn't that big of a deal. And then when he did shut down the borders for even weeks, almost a month after he shut down the borders, not down the borders, but he shut down travel from China, that he was xenophobic and racist and yada yada. They were continuing to say it still wasn't a big deal, even though he had taken action to stop travel from China, which is where the root of the virus was. Trump mentions that he doesn't even believe China knew how bad it was, and that the intelligence agencies only mentioned it to him once, and then he was the one who made the decision to shut it down, despite their telling him they didn't think it was necessary for him to shut it down. Now, 40,000 people, approximately, still came in from China after he shut off travel from China, but those individuals were American citizens, essentially being repatriated so that they could come home. So it had nothing to do with him letting more Chinese, citizens come over for whatever purpose. He was just letting American citizens come back. Now, the thing I don't believe or agree with him on is I think China knew how bad it was. China had shut down travel intercontinentally, if you want to call it. They had shut it down intercontinentally, meaning that people from Wuhan could not travel to other parts of China itself. They were maintained in China, in Wuhan, and would not allow them to leave Wuhan, so they couldn't go to Beijing or wherever else, yet they could travel internationally to other parts of the world, which would include the United States. So they were able to go to Europe, they were able to go to UK, wherever, California, in the States, wherever they could travel. They just could not travel intercontinentally within China itself, or country-wise, if you want to put it that way. But, so I don't agree with him that China didn't know. I think China absolutely knew. I think they, intentionally cut off the spread to them, but didn't necessarily have a problem with it spreading to other parts of the world. We're going to remember, China has lied about so many things. There's no real reason to believe what China has to say. So I wouldn't put any faith in what China tells you about what they didn't know, because one minute they know one thing, the next minute they, know nothing. Now, Martha MacCallum, followed up on Trump's previous statement about the 40,000 people who came back from China and asks, well, who tested these people when they came back to make sure they were not carriers of the virus or whatever? And he says that the states were responsible for testing them, and if they were doing their jobs properly, they did, which really should be the job of the states, not the federal government, to test them. He mentions that Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, that they put these people who came back to Florida, they put them through a rigorous testing and quarantine situation if they felt they needed to go through it, and mentions that all the states should have been doing that from their leadership perspective of the governors. Now, that is a really nice thing to believe, that the governors are going to take responsibility. There's so many that don't, that it's a little hard to believe that any of them actually did or all of them actually did. Some of them have been very shoddy in their approach to addressing it. Not to mention the fact that in the early days, when he was still letting these 40,000 people come back, a lot of Democrats, and I'm not trying to be, partisan here, but a lot of Democrats came out and said that the virus wasn't that big of a deal. So how much effort those governors actually put into checking them in those states that did not believe the virus was that significant really leaves you to wonder, did they do any major testing, or was it really only states or governors, Republican or Democrat, that honestly believed that the virus was a threat, who actually did any serious testing of those American citizens being repatriated for the purposes of protecting them. Next, Bret Baier mentions a quote that's at the Lincoln Memorial, which is the site of the virtual town hall. It's empty with the exception of the moderators, MacCallum and Baier, and President Trump, and then later Steve Mnuchin and Pence, which we'll get into. But he mentions there's a quote from Lincoln from his second inaugural address that says, "With malice towards none, with charity for all, let's bind up the nation's wounds." And Baier asks Trump if he feels like he is bringing people together. And Trump says he hopes people are coming along. Baier says that there were a number of people on Capitol Hill. He never mentions a specific party, which, without knowing for sure, I would be surprised if there were any Republicans in it. More like Democrats saying it's an inappropriate place because they believe Trump is a divisive president. But see, that's what every party's people believe about the president before them. They're all divisive, and divisive has become this thing. And it is dangerous that people keep saying, well, they're trying to divide us. You're trying to divide us. You're trying to divide us. This is the part of the problem. This has become like a bad wrestling match or a bad sporting event. Our guys are good. Your guys are bad. And you can't have that in a nation. You can't have good guys and bad guys. There has to be an appreciation for what the other people are doing, even if you don't agree with them. You can respect that they're doing something and you feel you don't think it's the right direction for the country. You could say all that, but when you started to getting to throwing fits at each other and saying, well, I think he's divisive or he's divisive or she's divisive, whatever, you're dividing people and you're saying, well, we're good and you're bad. And that's not right. We're the better than you are. It's also, saying we're better than you are. So he says, do you think you're bringing the country together? Trump says, he thinks people will come along. He hopes people will come along, that we were doing very well before this happened. And then this thing occurred and it just put us, in a downward motion. He says, there were a lot of politics involved in the Russian hoax, he calls it, which there's a lot of things that are proving that there were problems with that investigation. So I'm not going to debate the point with people who refuse to accept reality, that there were a lot of violations of policy and rights for people when it came to that. If you want to argue that point, then you just really don't care about the rights. You're more concerned about your side winning, and that's ridiculous. You just got to get over it. There were people lying. They were manipulating the system in a way they didn't need to do. Has it been done by the other side, the Republicans? Of course it has. I'm not defending Republicans over Democrats, but the bottom line is it happened in this case from the Democrat side. Grow common sense and accept it happened. You don't want to keep going back and saying, well, you shouldn't look back at the past. Well, then, you stop worrying about the fact that, people have lied in the past that weren't on your side of the political world. Okay. So if you think Trump did this and Trump did that. Well, so did Bill Clinton. So did Barack Obama. So did George Bush. So did George H.W. Bush. None of these people are without flaws, but just accept the reality that they abused the system and there was a Russian hoax. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about it, because there's no reason to waste time on this. Any rational person knows there was lies in the government. The government, period, abuses the Constitution. That said, Trump states that he's optimistic. He believes that the next year will be a good year for the United States, and that he is still actively seeking answers for how the virus was birthed by accident or intent or whatever, and how it, transferred into the United States and became such a problem. Then MacCallum asks Trump about the race for a vaccine and the expedited nature in which countries are trying to solve this or create a vaccine. She says, or asks the president if he's concerned that they're moving so quickly into human trials, and if he thinks it's safe for these people to participate. And he says, well, they volunteered for it. They wanted to help. They know what is involved with a human trial. And he says he doesn't care who comes up with a vaccine first. He doesn't care if it's the United States or if it's another country. He'll tip his hat to them. He just wants a vaccine for it. And he truly believes there will be one by year's end. Now, I'm telling you, not Trump, that we don't need a vaccine for it. We hardly have vaccines for anything, and none of them are 100% effective. Vaccines is like an excuse to spend money in a lot of ways, and it's a government thing. It is a very expensive price tag for the American people to fund it, and it is done in many cases. These studies for a vaccine or whatever don't lead to vaccines. You had hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, spent on HIV vaccines, and it never worked. You have hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, spent on research for the flu vaccine, and it's only 33% effective. We have solutions that already exist in place to solve COVID-19, also known as SARS-CoV-2. We'll discuss that in another episode because there's some information that has come out that makes it very clear none of this stuff that's happened in the United States or really anywhere in the world had to be as vicious or definite or deadly or fatal, whatever you can call it, as it has been. We'll get into that later. But enough to say, Trump doesn't care who comes up. Trump does not care who comes up with a vaccine as long as there's a vaccine. Then they play a question from a lady by the name of Dina Rubio, who is a co-manager of a restaurant in West Palm Beach, Florida. And she asks the question to the effect of, meat prices are starting to go up because there is a decrease in production because there's not as much of a demand, which is making there are more limitations. You can see this at places like Kroger's and the like. Stores are starting to, where they used to be limiting your number of toilet papers, now they're limiting your number of beef and chicken products in the meat market areas. And she's saying that because prices are starting to go up, restaurants like hers, and this is just restaurants in general, they don't have a high profit margin. It's just, that's not the nature of restaurants. Restaurants make like a 21 to 22% profit range, which might sound like a lot, but it's not, because they haven't paid any taxes yet. And their taxes are ridiculous in restaurants. And Dina's wondering, with meat prices increasing and the profit margin already short in restaurants, and now further complicated by the fact that their seating levels are restricted. They can't seat as many people. In some cases, it's 25%. In some cases, it's 50%, but it's definitely not at 100% occupancy. They have to pay their staff, depending on how they pay their servers and their kitchen teams and all the other parts of their team that are necessary. So how are they supposed to survive through this when there's so many limitations already put upon them, and then the price of meat is changing, going up? Trump gives the answer that, it won't be forever. It'll eventually get back to that. And people will start coming into restaurants, and you'll start having 100% capacity again, and you'll have that, freedom to not worry about that. It's going to change. It's going to change. And he signed the Defense Production Act, which made the meatpacking plants an essential aspect of the economy, meaning that they have to stay open. They have to continue to work. And even though there are some companies, at least one or two, who have complained and wanted to shut down for a couple of weeks, he said they have to find ways to make it work and to continue to produce meat and process it, because if they don't continue to process, it makes it complicated on the agricultural end, where farmers are growing meat products of the animals, and they have nowhere to send it. And if they don't have a place to send it, to process it, to then get it to market, they have to euthanize those animals after a certain period of time. And then that just messes up the food chain cycle, just sends it into a whirlwind nightmare, spiral downward. So he says that's why he signed the Defensive Production Act. It's now an essential business. They have to keep moving. That there are some concerns. Even one of the other earlier questions from a guy named Danny Lemos mentioned that his father worked in one of those meatpacking plants, and that there was only like thin pieces of plastic separating one worker from another, and they were concerned about it, and that immigrants didn't even want to work, but they needed the money so they would take the jobs. And Trump said, well, they don't have to work if they don't want to, and some of the plants aren't having any problems at all, and some of them are, and people don't have to work if they don't want to, and that's, some cases they're spreading out more if they feel like they need to protect the workers. And he just talks about all the things that are being done to solve the problem if there are concerns about, health safety. So the issue is that he's wrong that you're going to get back to full capacity in restaurants anytime soon, because there are so many people that are freaked out by this COVID-19 thing. Even people that live in states that have very small numbers of COVID cases, they're freaked out because they keep hearing this advertising campaign on the news and through politicians included. This is very dangerous. This is very contagious. This is out there, and it's getting everybody, and you got to be careful. You got to maintain social distancing. You got to do this. You got to do that. Do you think anybody's going to want to go back to a restaurant when you're spouting that garbage? You're going to have people who are freaked out for, I guarantee you, years, walking around wearing a mask, scared to get too close to people, will suspend any potential of going back to a restaurant. Even business owners who own restaurants who will refuse to open because they don't want to take a chance on getting sick themselves. They're afraid of liabilities from people suing them, whatever it is. This is not going to bounce back. It's almost insane to me that a guy who runs businesses doesn't realize if you're in a tall building and someone screams, that plane looks like it's coming towards us, that they're not going to be scared at some point of going up into tall buildings because they've seen a plane hit it. Or you hear fire in a crowded theater. You're not going to be afraid of being in theaters because you're afraid you'll get trampled or killed. The more you advertise this pandemic that is complete crap, the more you are going to scare people into not wanting to go to places. You can keep talking about, well, it'll go away or we'll get a vaccine. That's not going to change people who are scared to death because you keep advertising death. It's very contagious. Everybody, people could get it and they could die. And you don't have any help from the local. You don't have any help from the local people, President Trump. You don't have the help from these people. They're not helping you. They're out there talking about how you could kill grandma if you don't wear a mask. People are not even wanting to go out. There are a large number of people don't want to even go out without wearing a mask. I've seen people who would pass by me on the sidewalk who will now walk all the way around. Now, I may be a scary looking dude, but let me tell you something right now. Not that many people would run around me before. But it's happening. It's happening. And the further you perpetuate this thing, the longer that process of recovery is going to happen. It's not going to be overnight. People don't just stop being scared of the monsters under the bed. It takes them a while. They have to build up some courage, slowly look in their room every night, have their parent look or whatever, until finally they can, sleep in their bed without waking up, without having nightmares. It takes time. And the longer you perpetuate this notion of it's contagious and people are dying from it and you've got to stay away from other people and you got to wear a mask and you got to wear gloves, the longer it's going to take to get back to a normal life and for these businesses to survive. And it's going to affect the food chain. And you're going to have problems. You're not going to get into a stadium with 100,000 people in this year. You may not even get into it next year. Unless all of the people start realizing that this thing is a big freaking scam that has been perpetuated on them that could have been stopped and wasn't stopped because you didn't have the right advisors and you fell for their nonsense. The next question posed to President Trump is from a retired teacher named Carol McNeil out of Bluffton, South Carolina. And she talks about how a relative in a higher-end nursing facility in Boston was diagnosed with COVID-19. And she wants to know what the plan is to protect those people. And Trump goes into talking about how, nursing homes really are ground zero because this virus has been shown to really affect the elderly and people who have significant pre-existing conditions. Like respiratory infections or things of that nature. So he says, this is really, and he cites an example about how sometimes they've been putting people who were diagnosed with COVID into some of these rooms at nursing facilities. This happened in New York, by the way, where they were putting people who were diagnosed with COVID-19 that were elderly. They were putting them in nursing facilities. Well, you might naturally think, well, if they're elderly people, then maybe they need to be in a nursing facility, but not when the thing that they're carrying is highly contagious and highly dangerous for people who are already compromised because their health is already in a bad way because of, age-related diseases or pre-existing conditions that require them to be in a nursing facility, because not all nursing facilities are just the elderly. There's some young people who live in nursing facilities too because of their health. So Trump says you'd have to talk to governors about that because, they're the ones who are in charge of their states and they need to be monitoring this better. He's like, I can't monitor every nursing facility in every state. And he's absolutely right. The president's job, the federal government's job, is not to monitor everyone's you know, um, daily activity. That's what a governor's for. Governors don't report to the president unless it's related to a national disaster. Otherwise, they're supposed to oversee their economies. They're supposed to make sure they make deals to better the success and the economic situation and the social situations within their own states. That's their responsibility. The federal government is there to help provide aid. It's supposed to be in the event of national disasters and to offer guidance when it comes to national laws that are being put into place for whatever reason. The removal of regulations or whatever that case may be. But when it comes to daily activity within states, governors are supposed to hand down part of their power to, county judges, to city mayors, and they're supposed to help oversee that part of the machine within the state. Anyway, he says, you need to look into that. He talked about how he provided more beds in the form of the Army of Engineers came in, and in the Javits Center in New York, they built a 2,900 bed basically facility into the Javits Center so that it could be used. They brought the U.S. Comfort to the harbors of New York so that could be used for patients that were not related to COVID-19 that could be handled in a different way so that they could leave the hospitals, those stable hospitals, those standalone hospitals, available for COVID patients. And Baier talks about how, there were people who were having other situations going on, other health situations, whether it be cancer or diabetes or whatever, that were being turned away. And he said, I don't understand why they're doing it. This is Trump saying, he doesn't understand why they did it. He said, you can't just stop treating other people, especially when not all of your beds are full. And, when U.S. Comfort started to get some infections on their ship, he turned it into a COVID facility. And then there were beds that were opened up in other areas in hospitals that they could have used to try and help treat people with other existing conditions. We're talking about people who are suffering with major things, cancer, diabetes, all these things that can also put your life at risk that you have to monitor, especially if it's advanced. And he said, you've got to look to the governors because I can't handle that. And he said, I can't control that, and I'm not supposed to control that. He talks about how the COVID virus is a very dangerous virus, and that he compares it to the Spanish flu that happened back in 1917, which killed between 50 and 100 million people. That's a pretty large margin not to know a number. Don't ask me how that is that no one's exactly sure of how many people it killed. My speculation is if you don't know how many people it killed, it probably didn't kill as many as you want. That may be another advertising campaign. Not that I'm suggesting that the Spanish flu wasn't dangerous, but I'm just saying that when you don't have a spectrum of how many people it killed, it could be because of the way, information was maintained back then. But moving past that, his point is that virus was far more aggressive, but this one is far more contagious. And so when it gets to people who specifically have more co-opted or challenged immune systems, it's much easier for them to be impacted by it. And so we have to be very vigilant in making sure that people who are the most susceptible are the ones who are kept away from it as much as possible. And that's good sense, right? If you know someone has got major health issues already and this is just going to aggravate that situation, then help keep them away from it. Next, there is a question from a sole proprietorship run by two people, a thing called Rosemark Grips, which is out of Florida. And it's a husband and wife, Mark and Mary Rose. And they're talking about how they did not qualify for the payroll protection because they are sole proprietors. And as a result of it, they can't get any financial help to help keep them going, to pay their bills, to maintain their rent costs, all that stuff. They're an example of people who are falling through the cracks in this situation. And there are many of people who have. Many. For every small business that you see that does get money, there are about 100 smaller sole proprietorships that get nothing, if not 1,000. It's just insane. This is why so many of them cannot survive like this. And they said, what can we do? How are we supposed to survive? And he goes, look, the solution is to get you open back up. You're a great business. This is Trump saying this. We got to get you open back up. We're opening up the golf courses again. We're opening up the beaches. We're opening up the parks. We got to get people back out in the world. That's the bottom line. Okay. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I would try to give any president the benefit of the doubt. But he's not in touch with reality when it comes to this. Okay? I'm not talking about political spin or whatever else. He's either ignoring it or he just doesn't get it. But the bottom line is, and I say a lot, but here is a bottom line. As long as you keep perpetuating a fear of going out in public, of being near other people, that the beer cooties, as I call it, is going to get you, as long as you keep talking about it, no major advancement in people going back out in the world is going to happen among those who are scared. And that is probably, if not 50%, in the early 40s or late 30s, percentage-wise, of people who are scared. Because they have been advertised for 2 months about how you have to stay inside or you're going to get it and you're going to die. You don't get people who you've been scaring and doing basically a version of Pavlov's dogs to for the last 2 months to just go, okay, now I'm going to go back out. Because your curve means nothing. Because as long as people are dying, they're going to be scared that they're next. As long as you keep talking about 68,000, 70,000, 100,000, we got 1 million people infected. People who don't have a common perception of how many people are there on the country, because there's so many people who don't realize there's 330 million people in the country because they don't see the whole country. They see their backyard. They see 800 or 900 people in a month on a normal basis. They don't understand or comprehend 328 or 331 million. It's not how their brain works. If you don't have exposure to it, you don't realize it exists. So you see 900 people around you on a monthly basis, or 10,000 in a year, or whatever that number would be, and you think, oh my God, every one of these people has it or is going to get it, and half of them are going to be dead, and I'm not going to be able to survive. People don't have a perception of what's outside of their experience. So they can't go, okay, this is just, of these 900 people, it's more likely that, maybe 3 of these people could have this condition. They don't perceive that. They see 1 million people and they see 900 people who are walking dead because they're going to get it and they're going to spread it to them, and then they're going to be dead, and they're scared. The people who cannot see past it are going to be scared, and you could talk every day. Let's open it up. Let's get back out there. It's not going to happen like that. It is a blinded perspective if you think that that is how it's going to work. Yes, there are people like me. There are people similar to me that I know that will get out there and do it. I also know people who don't want to go anywhere without a mask or gloves. They don't want to go to restaurants. They're scared to sit at a restaurant across from people right now. How do you know you don't have it? Because they keep saying you don't know if you're going to have the condition. You've advertised to them successful. I'll give it to you. Hell of a marketing campaign. You scared nearly half this country into believing they're going to die. Nicely done. Don't expect them to automatically, when you say, okay, get back out there, they're going to go, okay, because it's not how it works. And you're not answering their question by saying, we're going to reopen you and you'll be better off. No, that's not how it's going to work at all. Chances are these people are probably going to go out of business. They're going to go find jobs elsewhere because they probably cannot stand to survive and stay open. Unless they're in one of those states that's essentially saying, take your guidelines of 25, 50, 75, 100% and shove it up your butt because I'm going out, I'm reopening my businesses, and we're going to get back to work. And they have the support of the community to do it. Because if they don't have it, especially in like a niche market like these people are in, where they're selling golf putters, golf grip, putter grips or whatever it is. I don't know anything about golf, so forgive me on that. But the bottom line, Kingsley, you're doing it again. I hate it when I say bottom line too much. I don't want to be too repetitive because it decreases the value. But they're in a niche market. It's not like a restaurant where at least everybody needs it or wants food, right? I mean, I just don't understand these politicians, and Trump is included in that. It's as though they don't grasp this concept that they've scared people to death. They really have. They have scared these people utterly out of their minds. Because the media out there who hates your guts because they don't agree with your political ideology, you can have Fox News and some of these others, but you've got NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, all of these that have been established news sources over the past 30 years that are out there, and they're going to be like, okay, well, there's another death. Another person's died for COVID. Our numbers keep going up. That's one of the things also I'll tell you annoys the hell out of me. I get so annoyed by people like Cuomo going out there and saying, well, here's the situation. Our curve is going down, but we've had our highest death count yet so far. Of course you've had your highest death count, you moron. You lying sack of garbage. Because every time someone dies, your death rate gets higher. If you come back and say our death rate's lower than it was the other day, your death rate was lower than the other day, then you've got zombies or people who've been resurrected coming back to life. Otherwise, every day your death rate is higher, you ignorant, you lying sack of garbage. I won't call him ignorant because he knows what he's doing. It's a fear factor. Well, our death rate keeps going up. Well, of course your death rate keeps going up. That's kind of like saying, you're at a hospital or what is the word? A maternity ward, and you're saying it seems like babies are being born every day. Well, no kidding, Sherlock. How do you think that works? I mean, you're in a maternity ward. If you were in a morgue, you wouldn't be saying it looks like people are coming back to life every day. The death rate's going down here. The death rate doesn't go down. The death rate is or it always goes up, okay? If you're telling me that Yesterday, 10 people died, but today only 8 people had died. Then 2 people came back to life somewhere. Where the hell are they at? I want to avoid them because I don't know what's going on with them. Every day the death count increases. So stop doing that. It's not nonsense to them. They know what they're doing. Next, Trump gets a comment. It's not really a question from a lady named Carolyn Perkins, who says she's a retired nurse and guidance counselor. And she says that she and her family and her husband are praying for Trump every night. And they just don't understand why he uses language and he doesn't answer the press questions directly and why he has to talk about old successes. And he just rambles. She said, why don't you use those great qualities that made us vote for you for president? Okay. Well, first off, I don't believe for 1 second this lady actually supported Trump under any circumstances whatsoever. Because when you start by saying you paying someone a compliment and then you immediately tell them what's wrong with them, you didn't support them. Nah, that's not realistic. The lady is probably a Democrat or liberal or independent who does not like Trump and is pointing out things she doesn't like about him. Because if these are the things she's like, you keep talking about old successes, you keep rambling, and you keep being mean to the press, but I supported you. I believe that. Tell me something else. Give me another one. Because that joke doesn't work on me. Trump says, I have to defend myself against the press. And yes, he does. And for anyone to think that he doesn't need to defend himself against the press when they keep asking him ridiculous questions like, do you think a president who's lost more people than were lost in Vietnam deserves to be reelected? Trump didn't send these people off to die. Come on. That is a ridiculous comparison in the first place to say that. That he told people to go drink disinfectant. Never suggested it at all. He asked a question. Was it possible to use ultraviolet light within the body because ultraviolet light has been shown to kill the COVID virus? Could you use some way, because disinfectant kills it? Is there some kind of a thing you could put in your body to essentially disinfect your body? He didn't say, hey, can we grab some Clorox and do it? That's not what he said. Let me give you a little inside information, people. Do you know what radiation is? It's poison. The whole idea of chemotherapy is they pump chemicals and induce radiation treatment on you to kill something, which is a form of disinfectant. They're killing something with something that also poisons your body. And their hope is the impact of the radiation poisoning is not as bad as the impact of the cancer, but it's still a form of disinfectant. It's not Lysol, but it's still a poison. And there is poisons that are introduced into your body every day. Every time you put some kind of a pill in there to treat a condition, it's a type of poison. It's a low-level poison, but it can still, if it was given to you in excessive doses, it could kill you. That's why you have limitations for morphine, for any number of drugs, because it is a poison. So stop with that, these things where you're saying, well, why does he just answer their questions? Well, he does, but he's also calling them out every time they lie about what he's actually done. And touting his old successes, how many times has Obama or Bush or any of the others ever not touted their success? Well, I left the greatest country in the greatest health, and we were on a rebound. You don't think that Obama was bragging about his successes? You think he's any different from Trump? Give me a break. That is hypocritical beyond belief. Hell yeah, he pitched himself as, look what we've done. What president's not going to pitch what they've done? For crying out loud, what do you expect him to say? Well, let's forget about all the good things we've done. That's not important. Let's just talk about this. That's not the way any business works. Are you going to go and you get a small business or a business award every year for best business, cleanest business, whatever else? You going to tell me you're not going to put it on the wall? You get salesperson of the year. You don't tell me you're not going to go have a party about it or whatever it is to say employee of the month or whatever. Be happy you got it. You just go, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. The hell yeah. Okay, well then don't ever take a bonus that comes from it. Don't take a job promotion. Don't take an increase in pay. Don't take any of that stuff because we don't really need to talk about our past successes. That is such a big bunch of crap. Hell yeah, you're going to tout your successes. And why not? He's improved the VA system when it comes to their health care. Yes, he's fought off terrorists. Yes, he's been restocking the military or medical supplies in response to situations like this. Yes, he's established a Space Force. Don't ask me why I don't completely get the Space Force thing because I just feel like it's, I don't know, weird Star Wars or whatever. Yes, he's taken out a number of terrorists that were dangerous and a threat to us. Yes, he's tried to negotiate to stop the creation of more nuclear weapons from North Korea. Yes, he's negotiated with China for better deals so that our farmers and we're not taking a huge financial crush every year in the hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs when they pay nothing for coming in here. Anybody with a brain would tout that kind of success. Baier asked Trump, if he thought the election would come down to the COVID situation. And it shouldn't, but it will. Because people have short memories. The unfortunate reality of things is not what have you done for me, it's what have you done for me lately. And that decides more things than you can know. He could have done great things for the last 3 years. If this virus thing continues to perpetuate throughout the summer, and I mean if this thing doesn't end fast, and you're not at 100% opportunity by July 1st, and I don't see that happening with a lot of states. A lot of states I think they're slow walking their reopening. If you don't see it in the minds of the American people, and he doesn't get back to those rallies, he needs those rallies. He's going to be facing a situation where he has a heavy majority of the press against him that can say whatever they want and can hold back whatever they want. And they've got the access and the attention of people because they're your source for finding out if you're going to die tomorrow from the beer cooties. And they keep listening to them. And as long as they don't get out and they think independently, have conversations, explore, as long as people aren't doing that and seeing life return to the positive places we were going before it, then yes, he will face a very serious threat in losing the election. He shouldn't, but he probably will.